Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks, where kindred souls gather to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as a February room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for Composite Development's fly rods and fishing accessories. Tech, precision, ingenuity, legacy. Go to cdfishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's your host, Lauren Carnop, and this is the February Room.
Welcome to the February Room. Today I have the great pleasure to sit with Greg Munther. Greg is a former Forest Service biologist and district ranger. Thank you so much for sitting with me today and inviting me into your beautiful home.
Looking forward to it, Lauren.
First off, these views, we are sitting right over my shoulder is a river, and it's beautiful outside, and this is a really great little paradise you have in your home.
It is, and fishing's pretty good back there.
Yeah. So you've been fishing for how many years?
Well, I was gifted. My dad got me fishing. I can remember, I guess my great-grandmother took me fishing with literally a pin and a string in Washington State in a little lake near Seattle. And then one of my favorite memories is my granddad taking me to perch fishing in Loika Lake, north of Spokane. We live near there, so it's been a ride for 70 years. It's been a great adventure, and I say my fly rod takes me to so many interesting places.
Is there a place in particular that is one of my favorite memories, being on the river?
I have some great favorite memories, and one is with a dear friend, his lifetime friend, Tom Kovalicki. We were fishing for tarpon in Costa Rica off the mouth of the Rio Colorado, it's actually in the ocean, but it's right at the mouth of the river, and the ocean there is 65 feet deep. But you're fishing about 30 feet deep with a fly rod, so it means heavy weighted lines and heavy flies, and you're trying to counteract the drifts of the wind and the tide and the river, and you're trying to get your fly down. But when you get it down 30 feet, there's enormous tarpon and hundreds of them. And so the trick is getting down. So my favorite memory with my long-term friend Tom was we'd had a very successful day. I'd landed 3 tarpon between 75 and 125 the day before. And we went out the last day, and it was the last 15 minutes, and the sun's starting to set. And both of us hooked up on tarpon immediately. And we both had them on, and tarpon, of course, are famous for jumping clear in the water. They both jumped, our lines crossed. We were that close together, lines crossed, and we both lost our tarpon. And I thought, what a wonderful way to end up a trip. It was almost a fairy tale, but it was a true story, and it was a great adventure for both of us.
Well, and tarpon are just, like you said, they're fun fighting fish.
And 65 feet deep water, they are really hard to move. Imagine yourself with a big log laying it down at the bottom of 65 feet, and you're trying to pull it up with a fly rod. Well, then try it with a fish that's actually moving too. It's a challenge. 45 minutes to an hour and a half per fish. So the day I landed 3, I put my rod down and I said, no mas, I don't want any more. Done for the day.
There's always a lot of elements going against you when you're trying to catch the monster fish, but maybe it's considered a catch.
Yeah.
Even if
the jump is everything on tarpon. The tarpon experts, and the dedicated fly rod people, getting that first big jump, is really what they're after.
Totally, yeah. I mean, just being out in that big water too can just be a little bit overwhelming, and to think that you have to, of all the species out there, to try and target that one, it's pretty exciting to get.
Well, when you see these schools of tarpon rolling right, not very far from your boat, they're there. It's just a matter of getting to them. And this fellow our guide had a spinning rod with a big jig on it, and he would keep saying deeper, deeper, and we'd say, we're trying, and He said, deeper, deeper. And he would get out his spinning reel and lower the jig down 35 feet and jig it twice, and boom, have another tarpon out. Deeper, deeper.
So you have you had an incredible job. And I mean, a job that a lot of people want to do, and especially in the outdoor industry. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the forest?
It's a great story. Yeah. Actually, I was adrift in high school, but I loved being outdoors. It was just my life, is being outdoors, and so I decided that what was I going to do in college, and so I decided I'd be a dentist, because dentists will only work 4 days a week and make a lot of money. So I thought, that's my kind of job. Well, I sat up in my dorm room the first year, looking outside a window, 3 stories up, and I thought, geez, this could be my office. This is not going to work. So then I switched into forestry and wildlife and fisheries, and ended up with a master's degree in fisheries. I worked in Hell's Canyon on my master's degree, and so then I was able to end up as a fish biologist with the Forest Service. And so I ended up having at one time 4 national forests, responsible for fisheries in 4 national forests in western Montana, and I finally got that pared down with other people coming in, and then took on a district ranger job at administering 330,000 acres of national forest west of Missoula up to the Idaho line. And that's great, because you had timber, mining, recreation, roads, wildlife, watershed, everything. So it's like having your own ranch, but instead of having to make money, you spent money.
I have to imagine that you went to probably like the most remote areas. You have some pretty incredible fishing stories of these remote waters.
I mean, we basically, the ranger district is 330,000 acres. It includes about a 90,000 acre recommended wilderness, a great burn wilderness. So there's still bull trout in those streams. It's wild. There's no roads in any of it on purpose. And our objective, of course, is to keep it in wilderness or qualified for wilderness until Congress can act one way or the other. So yeah, and so fishing's always good. And of course, I'm always looking for the most remote areas to go fish. And I've found some tremendous opportunities in Alaska, in Russia, and Argentina, and all over the place. But I'm always looking for a place where the other person hasn't got there yet. So yeah.
And are you still trying to find those places right now?
Yeah, I'm still on the agenda to fly out in late August. We floated another river. This river I'd been to about 12 years ago, and I got to tell you a story about this. So I turned 65 on that trip, and silver fishing was fantastic. And that particular trip, it can vary depending on the runs and so on, but I decided on my 65th birthday I would try to catch 65 silvers on top water, all on top. And so I'd been catching fish for a few days, and my fingertips were just hamburger, and it was hurt to let any fish go. I was just didn't even look forward to catch, and I got to 56 about mid-afternoon, and I couldn't stand it anymore. And I finally just reached down with my pliers and cut my hook off at the bend, and just have the fish pull it down. The rest of the day, I couldn't stand to take another fish. So I didn't get 65, but I did have many more than 65 pull downs. So that's the way it can be. And then other trips up there, you might not get any fish on top. It just depends on the year and the situation. But this year we're taking 1-person boats. 4 of us are taking 1-person boats. So everybody's kind of self-contained with a 1-person boat. And there's 4 of us. We're a 100-mile float. We'll be on the water, I don't know, 8-9 days. And we hope to catch silvers again. Yeah.
How many would you have to catch if it was your birthday?
It would be 77 this year.
Wow.
It's getting tougher.
You're like, that number keeps going up and it never goes down. You can't go back in time.
You can't go back. No.
Well,
you get to 100, you get to start over though, 1.
Oh, good call. Well, you're not slowing down, so it's probably will be happening.
Yeah.
You can start it back at 1.
Yeah.
What do you love about your job back in the day? Like, what other than being able to not go into an office, what made you want to be a fish biologist?
Well, you care about the resource. I mean, the resource, we need to hand the resource to the next generation in hopefully as good a condition as you found it. And it's really rewarding. A lot of my job was interacting with, as a fish biologist, with other proposals, timber sale, road construction, mines, all that sort of thing, and try to do the best to try to keep the habitat intact as much while these projects move forward. So it was a lot of interaction with people, a lot, and trying to convince them and show them the interaction between the very headwater streams and the bigger streams where they might be. And then sometimes it took shocking fish way up in the headwaters to show them that there were fish way up there in these little streams that went dry in the summer, except for some pools, but they're little cutthroat up in those headwaters that are going to go out the next spring and be the fish of the future. So, yeah.
I kind of like what you just said, that you want to make sure that you leave it better than the way that you left it, that the river's getting better. Did you feel that when you left that the waters are getting better, or do you think there's more upward battles that need to constantly be conserved?
Well, the battles are ongoing, and there's some tremendous work in restoration and people trying to secure water in streams that previously were dewatered with irrigation, and trying to allow fish movement with culvert replacements with bridges that fish can move through, and streamside vegetation, better management of streamside vegetation. There's all kinds of positive work. On the other side, there's all these challenges, which are more and more demands for the same amount of water. Water is going to be the new gold of the future. It will be as our population grows and demands. And then, quite frankly, climate change is warming some streams to the point where no matter what you do, you're going to lose fish. And that's been documented recently with bull trout in streams where the stream hasn't changed at all, but they're losing bull trout. And the main thing that's changed is the streams are getting too warm for bull trout. So those are big challenges, They'll be ongoing, and the future generation is going to have to stand up and decide what's important to them. So, yep.
Well, and for you, a lot of your looking at your home, and we went downstairs, you do everything very traditional. Why is that so important to do things from the ground up, I guess? Well,
it's to me, anything I do is the process. Way past how many fish I catch or what I kill with my bow. It's mainly what the process leads up to this complete package of an experience. And it's the country you're fishing in, the quality of the scenery, the quality of the stream, tying your own flies, appreciating the materials that go into tying. I mean, shooting your own birds that you use to tie flies, and same thing, shooting elk that you use to build arrows with, and all that sort of thing. It's all part of the process, and trying to make it as challenging as possible. I mean, I can go out with a bobber and a worm and catch a lot of fish, but I'm still, trying to tie my own flies and trying to fool them with that. So, yeah.
Is there a fly that you really like tying right now?
Well, I'm real partial to big fish, and in Montana, the biggest fish are in lakes. And so you're always looking at the 10, 12-pound fish. Where am I going to go catch the 10 or 12-pound fish? And there's a few places in Montana you can do that. And so I'm always trying to tie the ultimate lake fly. So I'm big on marabou because it flows in the water a little bit. And so I have this damselfly imitation that's tied with marabou. That's a very simple fly, but it has caught hundreds of fish. And so, yeah, I guess that's probably my favorite go-to fly because it results in some really big fish.
Do you have a good lake trout story, catching one?
Well, last week I caught 4 fish, 8 to 9 pounds, in a lake, with that same fly I was just telling you about, marabou leech fly, or damselfly, and but just to keep you honest, I went out yesterday in the same lake, didn't catch fish. So, but there are 15-pound fish in there, so that's it keeps you going.
Do you wake up every day being like, I'm gonna get outside? I mean,
Absolutely.
Actually, even doing this interview, you're like, I think we can, but I might be outside. So is that like you wake up? Is that you're just like, we need to get outside?
When you're approaching 77, you only got so many days outside left. And I want to make sure every day I am capture the opportunities and not pass up any opportunity. So, if the streams are right and the weather's good, and I'm gone. Even if the weather's crummy and the streams are bad, I'm still gone. There's always a place to search and try, and I just thoroughly love outdoors. Put my careers. I never wanted to get promoted to a point where I couldn't kick dirt every day. I wanted to be out where real stuff is real. So, yeah.
Well, and you also worked with backhunters and anglers.
Yeah.
What was your role with them?
Well, backcountry hunters and anglers, I started the Montana chapter as a chairman, and I was with the organization in a leadership role for 10 years, and the last couple of weeks I finally stepped down. But my role is basically because I care so much about habitat. And after I retired, I wanted to keep active in the field and wanted to do what I could to help habitat for both fish and wildlife. And Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is a real public lands advocate for keeping public lands available to people and accessible to people, and of course provide excellent habitat along the way. And so I thought I could help in that way, and so that's how I got involved, and it's grown. I mean, we're up to 50,000 people or something that belong to Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and we have in Montana, we have 3,000 people, and so yeah, it's been a good run.
Yeah, I think I even went to the grocery store and there's a beer for them.
yeah, absolutely. We have
They're really growing. They're now.
We have a public lands beer. Highlander Beer Company produces public land beer, and yeah. And I'm real partial to another beer. I mean, really enjoy the beer. It's made by Lewis and Clark over in Helena, but it's actually called Backcountry Beer. and so it's one of my favorites. It's down in my refrigerator downstairs right now. It's a good beer too.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the beginning you said that you did some work over at Hell's Canyon.
Yes.
That is such an interesting place because I went there, gosh, it's been probably 15 years. But I think you kind of get stuck with the Missoula rivers, and there's these other great areas like Hell's Canyon that, I don't know, it kind of sometimes gets a little bit overshadowed with the rivers. Like, what did you experience in Hell's Canyon?
Well, Hell's Canyon, I was fortunate to be there in my early 20s, so I was in the 60s. That was before jet boats, before all the people, and we still had strong salmon and steelhead runs, and it's a mile-deep canyon. And literally, I basically had the river to myself, and I was scuba diving at night, keeping track. I swam up along sturgeon that were longer than me at night with my little light, which, I mean, they're very passive fish. They're harmless, but you look over and there's a fish laying there that's bigger than you. It's pretty phenomenal. But it was just quality. We had, otters coming down chirping in the evenings, and you'd have to sit on these sandbars and have it all to yourself. And it was hot. I mean, I found a cave I could retreat to in the daytime, and I could hang out. But I spent a week at a time working on my master's there and tagging fish, shocking fish, everything. Yeah. So, yeah.
What an incredible experience. Have you ever had a moment being in the middle of nowhere where, I don't know, came across a bear or a moose or...
Oh, I've had lots of bear encounters.
Of course, a lot of bear encounters and moose encounters, but tragedy for them than...
I took my grandson on the Alaskan River a number of years ago on a float trip. He counted, I didn't count, 38 bears under 50 yards. But these bears are pretty passive. They're not hunted and they have no fear of humans, but on the other hand, they're really into fish. They really aren't a threat. In fact, one tried to grab my fish while it was on the line, and but it was fun. But we in Montana, we've got bears on almost all the mountain ranges now in Montana, and it really does. It's pertinent that you pay attention before you go, and be smart. And when I'm in Alaska, I'm quite emphatic that anybody that's fishing with me does not bring a fish into camp. If you want to, and you don't put it in a boat, because that bear will smell fish in your boat and go looking for the fish. even though it may not be there, it smells as fish. So if I'm going to keep a fish for dinner, we tie it with a rope and drag it to where we're going to camp. And we fillet it away from camp, so that all that stuff's away from camp. We might cook it in camp, but we wash our dishes away from camp. And we've had bears walk, within 20 feet of our tents at night. Just tracks are there in the morning, and they have no reason to stop because we take pretty good precautions with food and attractants, And so, yeah, I've only been chased once, and it was pretty intimidating. But I don't want to go through that. A cow moose is probably as dangerous as any animal out there. A cow with a calf, you want to be careful. I mean, they are big and they are very protective. And I've seen them go berserk just by stopping a car near them. They're wild.
It's so funny that you say that. My sister and I were running up Blue Mountain, and we kind of turned this path, and we looked up, and we're like, oh, that's just a really funny looking horse. And because, you're just not expecting, you think you're going to see horses up there. And as we got a little bit closer, I was like, oh my gosh, it's a calf moose. And all of a sudden the mom steps behind, and I was like, oh, yep, these are moose. But, the calves look like horses.
Right.
And so we slowly turned around and went down. And it was interesting because this other gentleman was going on a hike, and we're like, hey, just to let you know, there's a moose up there with her calf, so you might not want to go up there. And he's like, I brought my camera. I was like, oh, well, when I read about you in the newspaper, I'm going to be the one in the comments that write, I told you not to go up there. But nothing ever came of it. But yeah.
You want to be careful. I had a funny experience. It was in the Great Burn. I had 2 Spanish kids staying with us who were actually friends of our exchange student from Spain. But I took them into the Great Burn, and they'd never, of course, had any experience in that kind of country. So one wanted to go fishing with me to a lake a couple miles away. The other one wanted to stay in camp. And I said, well, be sure to stay, if there's moose, be careful, because there's a lot of moose tracks. So I knew there were going to be a good chance that they could have a moose come through camp. And I said, the best thing to do is get up a tree if a moose comes. The moose can't climb trees. So we came back several hours later, and I said, well, how'd it go? He says, I've been up a tree for hours. He says, every time I try to get out of the tree, he said, I tried to get my camera, but another moose would come by, and I had to go back up the tree. Up the tree for hours.
You got a lot stronger after spending.
Yeah, he has some good memories to take back to Spain. Yeah.
So cool. Well, looking at all your pictures in your home, there's one that particularly sticks out is that picture with you and your grandson, and it looks like you're literally hugging this enormous fish. You have to tell me this story.
Well, this story is pretty fantastic. I took my grandson, who was, 10 or something at the time, and he'd never caught a fish over 6 inches, and I took my wife, and we went to central British Columbia, on a salmon stream. But I was mainly getting them into chum salmon and pink salmon, in which they could catch pretty easily, and I took them on a float trip one day, and I had my spey rod with me, and but I was mainly getting them into fish, and I looked at this really good pool, and there was an outfitter fishing it out of a drift boat, or his clients were on shore, but they had stopped, and it looked like a really good pool for Chinook salmon. And I asked this outfitter, I said, do you mind if I start at the top and above you? And he said, no, my guys can't reach these fish anyway. He said, if they're in there. Well, I hooked 3 and landed one that was 40 pounds, and my grandson and wife were there to document it all, and it was a good fish, and on a fly was pretty fantastic. So yeah, it was a good trip.
Yeah, what fly did you use to catch that?
Big hooks, sharp hooks, and probably, I can't remember exactly, but it was, I know my favorite is like a 3/0 hook with a lot of marabou on it. Cerise and blue is a good combination, yeah. But getting it down in their face means usually putting some lead on it somewhere along the way.
What did your grandson think about it when it came in?
Oh, it was a monster. Well, when you see it planing out in the water before it came in, you can see this big dark fish, shadow kind of, created by this monster. He said, it's a monster, Grandpa, it's a monster.
It seriously looks like a monster.
Yeah, it was a good fish.
The fact that you're like holding it, it's like a big old hug, and then you're just like, oh, goodbye, old friend.
And I was just so happy. My grandson's now grown and has his own. But we've had some great outdoor experiences together, so it's been good.
I know that you've traveled everywhere. Is there another place on your bucket list where you'd like to go fishing?
Well, the whole world. If somebody comes along with a different checkbook, I'd be glad to go about anywhere. But we just booked a trip back to the Bahamas to take my family to the Bahamas next spring, and hopefully my daughter, who's taken up fly fishing, and her husband they're pretty enthusiastic fly fishermen, and we just got them a couple of fly outfits, and hopefully by then they'll be confident enough to stalk a bonefish and catch a bonefish on their own out in Bahamas. So that's on the bucket list for next year. So.
Well, then I'll have to interview them for the podcast to tell me about their interesting fishing stories.
Absolutely. Want them to be able to tell you about their first bonefish. Absolutely.
So It seems to you for your whole life is about creating traditions, not even just for your daughter and grandson, but it's also for creating traditions for the future generation.
Yeah, I guess maybe, by example, maybe sometimes people get a spark if they see what you're doing. And I've already had some positive feedback about some of the stuff I've done with traditional archery. People who have been shooting high gadget stuff that are inspired to go back and do their own and make their own bows and make their own arrows and that sort of thing. So yeah. I mean, it's kind of a lead by example, I guess, more than anything.
Yeah, because if the traditions start to leave with the people who only know it, you got to share the wealth of that knowledge.
Absolutely, I think it's and fishing the same way. Some of my most joyous moments are taking people who've never fished before, or taking youth out that have never fished before, and it doesn't matter what you catch. It's the fact that you're out there doing it and get the thrill of being out there. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for inviting me into your beautiful home and sharing your incredible stories. And I hope that, you can take my kids and you can share.
Oh, I love it. Actually, I do. I love kids, and I get so excited. What I found out is if you make a big deal out of it it's a big deal to them. If you catch a 6-inch perch on a worm and you make a big deal, they are thrilled to death. My one last story. Yes. My grandson, again, he had a little urban pond in Boise where he lived, and he never really had a chance to fish much. So I took him down to the urban pond and got a little bitty hook, little bitty worms, and put on, and caught little bitty pumpkin seeds, probably 20 of them. And he finally caught this rainbow trout. And he says, "Grandpa, what is it? What is it?" I says, "A rainbow trout." He said, "A rainbow trout?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a rainbow." I said, "Do we want to let it go?" He said, "No, Grandpa." I said, "Well, are we going to take it home and eat it?" He said, "No, Grandpa." I said, "Well, what are we going to do with it?" He says, "I'm taking it home and saving it forever."
He's taking his memory home with him. What did you guys end up doing with the fish?
We took it home, put it in the freezer. I don't know, it's forever.
Is it still in his freezer in San Francisco? Someone will be open and is like, "What's this fish doing?" He's like, "I told him I was going to keep it forever." Forever. Oh. Well, honestly, I really would. I'd love for you to share the memories with my kids, too. I know Justin loves it, and I know Justin would love the opportunity to be out there with me, too.
It'd be fun to get out there together.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much.
For the inside scoop on the fly patterns we've discussed with our guest, check our blog for Flies of the February Room. If you would like to enter the February Room, shoot us an email at info@cdfishing.us. Also, remember to subscribe, share, and, if we've earned it, give us those 5 stars. Thanks for dropping by, and remember to go fishing.